another episode of Words That Kill. And today's guest is Wayne Turmel, and we were going to be talking about accidental or self defense deaths of characters. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Good heavens. My name is Wayne Turmel. I am a Canadian living in Las Vegas now. I am the author of 6 novels, 3 of which are historical fiction, 3 of which are urban fantasy. I just wrapped up and released the final Johnny Lycan Werewolf PI novel. So there is death and mayhem and all kinds of things involved in both the historical fiction and werewolf thrillers. So I'm excited to talk to you. This is always good to hang out with people in the Go Indie Now kind of universe.
Yeah, and definitely like death on this show. So sometimes the character death can come as an unexpected accident or self defense by the hands of another character. So, have you written that type of scenario? And do you have any advice for writers looking to write those type of scenes?
Well, I guess I have. I actually just wrote one in my work in progress, but I can't really wrap my head around describing it yet. But sure, I think that in terms of advice for writers, the big thing is the death needs to do one of 2 things. It either needs to propel the story or it needs to have some impact on the protagonist if the protagonist is the one that killed the person. It needs to matter. John Wick, most of the killings in John Wick are self-defense and nobody really cares about them except they're kind of cool. Unless you really kind of know who the assailant is and know the relationship, and then you start to care a little bit. Finished writing a Foreign Legion battle, and and there was death and mayhem, but it's kind of window dressing, except the young kid who killed his first person in self-defense. And that has more meaning than the 15 Arab bandits that are dead on the sand that nobody cared about.
There is a difference between collateral damage self defense and actual one on one self defense.
Right. It depends. I mean, it's going to depend on genre. It's going to depend on a lot of things, right? Depends on who your audience is. An accidental death in a cozy romance is going to take on a very different tone than an accidental death in a thriller where you're kind of expecting a body count.
Yeah. So that's an excellent segue into the next question, which is an accidental or self defense death can often be a catalyst to the plot. And so, do you think these types of setups play best in genres like thrillers and crime novels, or can they be just equally as interesting in other genres?
Oh, I think where they show up most often is in fantasy. Always the chosen one is some nice, quiet, well-behaved person who finds themselves attacked by the evil soldiers or the hunters trying to track them down, and then they have to flee from their home out into Act 2. I mean, I did this myself with Akra's Bastard. Luca is an 11-year-old boy. He's in an orphanage. One of the brothers, capital B brothers, tries to molest him, and he thinks he's killed the guy. He hasn't, but he's marked him up pretty good, and has to flee the orphanage, and that's when the story really opens up.
So, character deaths that are accidental or in self defense often have a more legal or public consequence, especially if they're in a modern setting for the character. So, at least for the short time, they have a consequence. So, how involved and how long do you think those should play out for the character responsible?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is as long as it's valid for the story, right? I mean, with self-defense deaths in particular, there are 2 types of people chasing you. One is the authorities or the friends of the person that you killed, right? The bad gang is out to get you. But the other one is your own conscience. I mean, a good self-defense killing can tear the heck out of a good person. I didn't think I was that kind of a person. I didn't think I was capable. And now I'm dealing with my drama and my guilt and my shame throughout the story, if that's what the character is inclined to do.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
think readers expect some sort of a legal consequence for these deaths? I mean, and do they want it to be realistic or just kind of like, oh, it's there and then gone?
I think, first of all, I think people are more interested in karma than they are legalities, right? Seeing a killer captured by the cops is sometimes way less satisfying than watching them fall off a cliff, right? Karma
Yeah.
is a big piece of that. So as a writer, why are you killing this character? And sometimes it's just a simple, like, I am so done with this person, let's get them out of the way. And sometimes it's, by killing this character, something is going to move the protagonist to run for his life, re-examine his life, atone in some way. It's got to drive the plot and the character, if that makes sense and doesn't sound too incredibly arty and pretentious.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, what advice for emotional consequences would you have for writers delving into a character's psyche? And which emotions do you think are the most important for illustrating these after effects?
Wow, that's kind of a tough question. I think that the more out of character the self defense killing, and the more unexpected and horrific the accidental killing, the better, particularly as an inciting incident, which a lot of people use something like that as an inciting incident. That's why they flee the castle. That's why they go on the run, whatever the thing is. And it's like any kind of writing, there have to be stakes, right? What are the stakes of this happening? What you see a lot of is the main character is innocent, naive, nonviolent, um, wouldn't hurt a fly, and suddenly finds that they have killed somebody or something. And that changes you the first time you, I mean, I'm a farm boy. The first time you cut off a chicken's head, you're never the same,
Mm.
and not a lot of stakes in cutting off a chicken's head, but it's that same thing. It's like, you can't say that you would never harm another thing again because you clearly have, right? The more dramatic the change, the more antithetical to the character that you've set up, that disconnect creates the drama.
Definitely. So, an accidental death can be the result of a character's careless or reckless behavior as well. What advice would you give for retaining sympathy for the reckless character?
Sometimes, in the case of thrillers and high action fantasy and things like that, a good self-defense killing is actually satisfying and cathartic, right? When you kill Voldemort at the end of the story, guilt is probably, I mean, you might
Yeah.
feel a little guilty, but your
No, I
job
don't
is
think there's.
done.
Yeah, I don't think there's much guilt for killing Voldemort.
you know
You might feel bad about the actual killing part, but I don't think
well, that's
anyone.
that's what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
so, but to decide whether you're going to feel guilt or relief or exhilaration or shame or whatever you're going to feel after the killing, all of that gets set up before the killing. A killing that comes out of nowhere is exciting and thrilling, and it's a good plot point. But for it to really resonate, you need to set it up in advance.
mm, yeah. So you think that the it benefits from a setup, but not necessarily depending on the situation, but the payoff has to be there regardless.
Yeah, I think so. I think there has to be a reason that this happened, or it's simply a plot point. First of all, the more invested we are in the character that is defending themselves, the more the stakes are higher. If I'm Lord of the Rings and one of the dwarfs gets eaten by a Balrog or something, gee, that sucks. But it better not be Sam, right?
Yeah, I
Right?
think I
There
think
are
the
some
entire
characters we care about far more than others.
yeah, the entire fan base would have rioted if you'd killed Sam off, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly.
So, what advice would you give for showing a character's remorse for the killing? And do you think the level of remorse is a good way to demonstrate a character's morality?
Oh, I think it absolutely is. First of all, I mean, Writer 101, you don't say Bob felt remorse,
Mm,
right? Remorse shows itself in some kind of active verb, right? It could just be that his hands shake. It could be that he starts to cry. It could be he pukes his guts out. It could just be that he doesn't want to talk about it and he's very adamant about the fact that he doesn't want to talk about it. But all of those things are clues to Bob's character. Netflix
mm,
was built on movies that are just kind of action beginning to end, but they're generic bad guys. And, self defense against these bad guys is not really a lot of fun because none of them can shoot anyway. Right? The bad guys can
mm.
never shoot worth a darn. And so, they get picked off, and that's nice. The hero's winning, yay. But you don't really get emotionally vested.
No, they're basically collateral damage is what they are. So yeah,
Well, and they're
but
plot points. You know,
yeah,
characters that are plot points, you don't care about. It's like, okay, that one's gone next. And it's funny because I started realizing this a while ago in like horror films and action films where there's one woman on the good guy side, that there's one woman on the bad guy side, and the hero is not going to kill that woman. The woman is going to kill the woman because that's the way they
mm,
set this up, right? And they set
yeah,
this up, and she usually does it in service of saving the hero.
yeah,
And there's all these tropes that we live with and we kind of secretly kind of dig, and some of them are more tired than others.
definitely. There's a lot of action movie cliches out there that you can
Oh
see them
yeah,
coming
and
a mile away.
well, this is the challenge when you write genre fiction, right?
Yeah.
Is what is the line between trope and cliche?
So, accidental deaths can be played for shock value, as we've mentioned there,
Oh yeah.
or emotional impact. So, what advice would you give for writing a dramatic and very impactful death?
It's like there's buckets of stuff, right? There's what is the emotional relationship to the main character? What is this person's part in driving the plot? What is the surprise factor in this person dying? It's funny, I took my work in progress to my writers group the other day and introduced a character, and one of the women in the group just went, "Oh, he's dead." And I went, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, he is so coded. He's just, he's going to have the sad death three-quarters of the way through the book, and he's not, and she's wrong. But the fact that she just assumed that, because I set it up in the manner of the trope. Like, I want people invested in this kid so that when what does happen happens, it has a much greater impact.
Yeah, twisting the tropes is always fun.
And it's funny because of these three things, you really only need two. Like, you either need to be really emotionally invested in them and then it happens suddenly, or they need to be really important to the plot and it happens in a way that's unexpected and the emotional impact is there. It's like they don't have to be equal. in those buckets, but they need to be at least two of those three things to have purpose and for it to matter and really, I think, engage the audience.
Okay. So, death by self-defense is often full of suspense and or played as an action scene, sometimes even the big climactic scene of the book. So,
Sure.
what advice would you give for building the tensions for those type of scenes?
Well, if we're talking about the scene, right, we're going to assume, especially if it's the climax of the movie, we have been building to the inevitable confrontation between these two people. Like, we know it's building to a climax. The killer is very close to catching her. She is trapped in the house alone in the dark, and she knows the killer is coming. The story has logically led to this point. You've built it up, and it can be in little dribs and drabs, right? It doesn't have to be this nonstop locomotive barreling towards the climax. That can be very satisfying, but it can be very surprising. The person that we didn't expect to be the killer is the killer, and oh my god, I'm trapped on a road trip with this person. Right? I didn't know that this was going to be the killer until just now.
Yeah, I think you just described a lot of endings of horror movies there.
Well, yeah, of course, right? Tropes, cliches, lather, rinse, repeat. And some genres, of course, are built on those tropes, and you actually break them at your peril, right?
Mm,
So I think that you need to play fair, just as Deus Ex Machina, and kind of, you have to plant the seeds, right? You have to go back and go, that makes sense because really early on in the book, we saw this. Even in kind of a gunfight, Western shootout kind of thing, you still need to play fair. And especially with the emotions, somebody killing somebody out of self-defense and not feeling bad about it, if they've been this sympathetic, nonviolent character all the way along, is not very satisfying. Unless that's their moment of catharsis. That's the moment where they realize, I can't stand on the sidelines. I'm in the fight. And, and there's these moments, but you have to lead up to, particularly the final fight scene. You have to lead up to it. If Vertigo, the guy's scared of heights, the only way to get away from the killer is to run up the stairs to the top of the tower. Now I care.
yeah. Accidental deaths can also cause shift in character relationships.
Oh yeah.
What types of character reactions do you think work best to demonstrate the aftermath of an accidental death between characters?
Yeah, with accidents, it's funny when the person with which you are interacting dies, there are the same emotions, but they come in different amounts and you put different weight on them. With a self-defense death, there may be guilt, but there's justification there, and so that gets lessened. Accidents, which by definition we have no control over, often cause the most guilt and shame. Why was it me? Why wasn't I driving? Whatever it was
Yeah.
that caused the accident, there's a lot of emotional baggage, and it's not entirely rational.
Yeah, survivor guilt is a thing. So yeah.
Survivor guilt is definitely a thing, and particularly in literary fiction, it
Mm.
shows up a lot. My sister died when I was 5 and my mom wished it was me, right? There was that kind of that kind of generational trauma that comes out of it. And because, with a self-defense death, they had it coming, there was some karma, um, it was going to happen eventually, whatever the emotions are that are legit and can be incredibly strong. With accidental deaths, two things. Number one is you have this more emotional trauma. than you have with self-defense deaths. But also, if you do it right, the audience doesn't see it coming. And so it catches them as well as the character a little more unaware. The biggest reaction I ever got for killing off a character was in Acra's Orphans. And in the first book, in Acra's Bastard, Luca finds this bedraggled, useless pony that just adopts Luca and won't leave him alone. And in the second book, and it's been out for 5 years, so spoiler alert, Droopy dies defending Luca from a wild boar. As I wrote it, I laughed because I knew people were going to have a reaction. And it's funny because this was the second book of the two. I had killed off a fairly high number of people, mostly soldiers and evil spies, but I had killed off a healthy number. And the only nasty emails I ever got were about killing off this stupid horse.
Yeah, if you kill off the animal, the readers will come at you.
But also, nobody saw it coming. That may be the most satisfying death I've written.
So, what cliches?
Yes, I'm a terrible person.
No, you're not. You're just a writer. Every writer will understand that. All the readers are going, "Oh, you are horrible." What cliches or tropes do you avoid when writing character deaths, and what ones do you lean into when you're writing?
Okay, first of all, and this is more it happens in fiction more than film. The story where the narrator narrates his own death drives me crazy. You found this a lot in short stories. It's like, even though I write almost everything in first person, if I die in first person, story's over. I'm dead. That's it. The other trope, the dying soliloquy, where I am now going to take this time to fill in 5 paragraphs of exposition that I could have told you at any time. But I'm going to wait until this moment to do it.
Yeah, so kind of like, oopsie, I forgot to tell you all this stuff, but now I'm dying, so I got to tell you real quick.
Yeah, exactly. It just drives me nuts. And then the third thing is, and I haven't had to deal with it a lot, but I have had to deal with it, which is I used to fence. And I know that the average sword fight lasts about 20 seconds. Right? Even samurai swords, I'm a big fan of samurai movies, and a true samurai sword fight never lasts more than a minute. It just doesn't. It is very quick. It happens very quickly. Knife fights do not go on very long. And yet it's 4 pages of people with knives slashing at each other. And I understand drawing out the action. I understand making it cinematic. And I know that that is not necessarily the case.
Yeah, just chop off an arm, just stab him, get it over with.
You know, it's fine, make him bleed and run away. I'm all about that. I am all about disable and disengage. That is my, if I'm ever in a fight, that is my motto. Disable and disengage.
What are some of your favorite accidental deaths in fiction, film, or TV?
The one, because I kind of watched the show, so I was kind of caught by surprise by it, but my wife was devastated, was when they killed Matthew in Downton Abbey.
Oh, yeah.
Young newlywed, looking forward to the future. There was zero foreshadowing that anything was amiss. And he leaves Downton Abbey and he drives down the road, and that's the end of it. Which is how accidents happen in real life, right? It's not like there's a big neon sign that says this person is about to exit your life. And I thought it was brilliantly done and really brutal in a way that show was not, right? It was a very cozy kind of show in the great scheme of things. But I thought that was particularly devastating, and well done them.
Okay, and now we're into the three questions I ask everybody just for fun. Do you
Mhm.
find killing off characters easy to do, or do you struggle with it?
I'm not a great plotter, but I plot the story far enough out that I have time to make peace with it by the time that character needs to go. I'm building up to that point, and I look at it from this is the ultimate scene climax.
Mm.
And I've been waiting to do this for a while. And like I say, when I killed off Droopy, I giggled. It was really shameful and horrible of me. And I don't regret any of them. I don't know that they gave me great pleasure, except in the final book. There is a character that has been through the whole book that meets an end. It's both inevitable, logical, and actually opens up a whole new world as a result. And the way that he dies is pretty emotionally hard on Johnny. Um, and so that was satisfying, but I knew from probably the beginning of book 2 that this character was a goner.
Hmm.
So again,
Yeah.
it was inevitable by the time I got there. It was just do it. It's like,
Yeah.
how am I going to do it, and am I going to make it worth reading? Was more my concern than, gee, I feel bad.
So, what is the most creative or memorable death you wrote for a character?
In the Anubis disc, Johnny has a climactic fight scene with another werewolf. It ends very suddenly. Johnny doesn't technically kill him, somebody else does. And it kind of comes out of the blue. And so people don't expect the fight to end the way it ended. But that worked pretty well. And I think it convinced people to stick around for books 2 and 3.
Okay, so what was the oddest or most notable thing you've researched related to a character death?
I won't say which book because it's a huge spoiler, but the symptoms of renal poisoning. There's a character that is on dialysis for a long time. And what are the symptoms when it's finally nothing more you can do? That one was the best research. I mean, there's research, especially for the Lucas stories, Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans, that probably got me on a watch list because I was looking up Arabic words for "I'll kill you" and various things like that. Honey, if the cops come, burn this hard drive. That's
Yeah, okay. I think on that note, we will wrap the interview up and just tell everybody where they can find you and your books.
Oh, good heavens. Well, my name is Wayne Turmel, so I'm not hard to find. My website is wayneturmel.com. You can find my books. They're books. Where do you buy books? So Amazon is the easiest place. And I love connecting with people and would love to hear from folks.
Okay, and thank you for being a guest. And that's it for this episode. So bye for now.